Hello, hello. Welcome to Afternoon Drive here on Joppa Radio. My name is Drew Moholland. Hope you're all having a good day. It is Tuesday. It's been kind of a weird day. It was beautiful out earlier, and now it's a little bit cloudy and rainy, but still warm, so not horrible for this time of year. Again, my name is Drew Moholland. This is Joppa Afternoon Drive. We do it every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock. Very busy day already here for early in the week on a Tuesday. Usually not the busiest of news days, and here we are, very busy. We had the impeachment articles, 2 charges against President Trump earlier today. A little bit of history on that front. Of course, that's just one kind of procedural step in a long process here, but now to a full House vote it goes, and then eventually to a Senate trial at some point. So that'll be all eyes on Capitol Hill, it seems, every day in the impeachment proceedings. On the completely other end of the spectrum, much less important, but maybe not to some of you, the New England Patriots are again in a little bit of a spy scandal. I don't know. What is this thing? This videotaping thing. There was this Do Your Job documentary being filmed in Cincinnati where the Patriots are playing next. I don't know really what's going on with this. I didn't think it was anything when I first read it. It seemed like a miscommunication. Now it seems like it might have some legs. Maybe the Patriots did have cameras. I don't know. I'm not making any judgments here. It's Tuesday. We'll touch back on this Thursday. Let's see what's going on. I don't have time to talk about another Patriots scandal. Patriots got kind of a tough deal from the referees the other day, too, on Sunday in their loss. So that's that. Last night, the Celtics win, the Bruins lose. That's kind of the Boston winter sports teams in a nutshell. But really, the big story of the week, and really just an unbelievable man has died. Pete Frates passed away. Just yesterday we learned about the death of Pete Frates at 34 years old. He, of course, for those of you who don't know, and if you don't know, you should read up on him, but most of you do know because he made such a big impact. He was the man behind the Ice Bucket Challenge, battled that terrible ALS disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, and he did so much for the cause, raised so much money through that Ice Bucket Challenge and other events along the way once it gained steam, and just a man who, by all accounts, never complained and never, just in the worst of spots, just did so much with the tough hand that he was dealt. Star baseball player at Boston College, captain, Beverly guy. I'm from Danvers, of course, so I that lived the town over. Knew a lot about him as this story was kind of picking up when I guess I was just out of college. I guess when the Ice Bucket Challenge really took off, and for the younger people that don't know, everybody did it. All my buddies did it. All my guys did it. Everybody I knew seemed to be doing the Ice Bucket Challenge and raising money for this cause that Pete Frates put so much into. And on that note, we're going to dedicate this show to him. I'm bringing in a man who knew him well, a former coach of Pete Frates. Greg Genualdo is in the house. He's currently the Hamilton Wenham athletic director, but he coached Pete at St. John's Prep in Danvers. So we're going to bring him in just a moment. I believe he's in the house. Just walked in, I think. So why don't I do this? I'm going to get out of the way, take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk with the coach. And again, we're going to dedicate this show today to Pete Frates here on Joppa Afternoon Drive. Gone too soon, but what an impact he made. My name is Drew Moholland. We'll be right back. Keep it here. All right, welcome back to Afternoon Drive here on Joppa Radio. My name is Drew Moholland. Again, we do the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock as we approach the holidays. I should start wishing everybody a happy holiday, and good luck to all of you who are just starting your shopping or maybe finishing your shopping. Again, today's show we're dedicating to the late Pete Frates, who we lost yesterday at all too young of an age, but as I just said, what an impact he made. I'm bringing in a man who knew him very well during his high school years, Coach Greg Genualdo. He is the Hamilton Wenham athletic director, and he walked in and I said, I've had you on the show before, Coach, haven't I? And I remembered you brought your whole Little League team in here when you guys made a run. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, no, that was a great time. The kids still talk about that.
Do they really?
Yeah.
I believe it was the most kids we ever had in this studio.
It was about 8 or 9. You packed them all in. It was good.
It may have been more than that.
It may have been more than that. I don't know.
But Coach, of course, I know a sad day for you, and you probably heard that news yesterday, like the rest of us. But what a loss, losing Pete Frates.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad day for the world, more than just me. For his family, for his friends, for his tight inner circle. He was an inspiration, man. He was a beacon, and he was like that when he was 14, and he stayed true to that all the way through his life. And certainly he was a product of his family, John and Nancy, his parents, who are just amazing, amazing people. His brother Andrew, who's to me is a rock star in his own right. But he was a beacon of hope. And so, yes, he was made by all those people, and he was formed by all those people, and he'd be the first one to admit that. But certainly his impact on the world at large and everybody that he came in contact with personally, not just the tangential people, but will be felt for a long, long time.
Now, you coached him against St. John's Prep in Danvers during his high school years. So you did, 4 years, a football player for 4 years.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people know his baseball.
Yeah. So I met him in late August of his freshman year. I think it was 1999. And I told the story just earlier today, but he was all elbows, knees, and feet. Looked like he sharpened his elbows in the pencil sharpener a little bit. And he had these oversized feet, and he had on, it was, the first couple days of double sessions or whatever. And, he had on this old school 3/4 length Beverly football practice shirt, and it was way too big for him. I don't know. He definitely got it from one of his family members. And I knew right then, and shouts to Beverly and the people that come from Beverly and how tough they are. I just knew because he walked in with that shirt that he had to be a tough kid. And, he walked in, he was a quarterback when he was a freshman, and he walked into the huddle like he was John Wayne on the first day. I think he got the play wrong 42 times when we called it in a row. He said the wrong thing, but he said it with such conviction that everybody just kind of bought it. Through his, that was the start. It was the first day of his high school career, and of course, I coached him in football at that time, and then his senior year I helped out in baseball. I didn't realize he was also an incredible hockey and baseball player. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it was funny because at the time he was going to school with kids who athletically, frankly, overshadowed him. You had Matt Antonelli, who was the Gatorade Football and Hockey Player of the Year, eventually became a first-round draft pick in baseball. You had Jonathan Goff, who played for the Giants. You had John McCarthy, who played in the NHL. And you had all these athletic studs around, but Pete held his own gravitas. And then, I found out later in his high school life what a good baseball player was. Oh, great, he's going to get to play at BC. And then you follow him through college, and all of a sudden he's a captain, and he's hitting home runs in the Beanpot tournament.
Right.
And, the story I like to tell about Pete is when he was 14, it was all elbows, knees, and big feet. He knew exactly who he was and exactly what he wanted. And, wasn't going to let the odds around him deter him from where he wanted to go. And I think the last 24 hours especially, that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah. When captain at Boston College, obviously no small achievement in its own right. That's quite a career to get to that point. But there's probably a connection there between being a leader of your college Division I, big-time D1 baseball team and making a lead and leading a campaign like the Ice Bucket Challenge. Did it surprise you when he started something like that?
Yeah. No, man, that's of all the things you could ask, that's the quintessential perfect question, is because on the one hand, you look at the volumes of massive humanity that he's affected.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was late summer 2014 where that thing just caught fire.
Yeah.
And it was worldwide.
Literally everybody I knew did it.
And it was, I mean, it wasn't just people on the North Shore and in Beverly and Newburyport and, the surrounding communities in Danvers where he went to school, or even Chestnut Hill where BC is. It's the entire world.
Yeah.
And you think about all the people that he touched and you think, oh my God, what an incredible, amazing, I never could have thought that one person could do this. And then you think, and then personally, the small connection and the small time in this life that I was blessed to be able to know him and to know his family. You look back to when he was 14 and walked in the huddle and said the play wrong 14 times, like he was John Wayne, and you go, it's not surprising at all.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one, it's that, it's those opposites of this is the most amazing thing in the world, and yet if Pete was healthy today, he could still walk into the room with all those people, whether it's David Ortiz or Tom Brady and all the people that he could walk into those rooms and have a beer with them and make them laugh.
Yeah.
And because that's the type of human he was. And that's, and that's, no one wants to talk about a disease, and no one wants to talk about, it was Pete.
Yeah.
It was who he was. And so on the other hand, it's not very shocking, to answer your question. That to me is what I've been thinking about for 24 hours.
I heard WBZ television did a story today of somebody who is battling ALS. and can still speak. Isn't quite obviously at that where Pete ended up. But one of the telling quotes to me, and just something that really stuck with me, was Pete Frates made me believe like my life was not over. I still had plenty of life to live, and I just thought, you know what, that's worth it right there, right?
It's we should all be so lucky to have a small piece of what Pete had inside him, to go through our day, to not be in a good spot, and to realize just how we can impact the world. I was reading your signs out there, right? Be the change you want to see in the world, and you might not be everything to the world, but you might be the world to somebody. I was just reading those, right? And like, how perfect is that?
Yeah.
Right? Because Pete, whether it was tangentially or directly, and some of us it's in between, right? He affected us all in some way.
Yeah.
And it was all because of how he faced what he had to face, whether he was 14 surrounded by professional athletes, or at the end of his life by an awful, horrible, crippling disease that, his gravitas, his insides, who he is, made not a ripple in the world. It really made a tidal wave, and that's incredible.
You know what was fascinating to me about Pete? I mean, it doesn't get much worse than this. I mean, this is the worst of the worst diseases. I mean, it just takes away everything, and it's horrible to watch. And my goodness, if there's any, I mean, you don't like any diseases, but if there's one that could really use some strides being made, it's that one. Which is why it's so great to see the money that was put into that, and that the Ice Bucket Challenge raised and everything. But what always stuck with me, I would, he was still had the ability to tweet at the end, and he would, have those great technology that would allow him to use his eyes and still be able to get, his thoughts out and communicate. And he still had a humor somehow. He was still funny and saying things that were making me laugh, and it was fascinating to me.
I mean, it's fascinating, and like, you got to laugh about the dumb stuff that happened over the course of time, but somebody reported something stupid a couple of years ago, and there he is on Twitter a couple of years ago with, I think it was Metallica in the background playing "I'm Still Alive" or Eddie Vedder or whatever.
Yeah.
And he'd be at games and enjoy, and you're right. He had, and it was genuine. It wasn't. He didn't want anyone to think he was feeling sorry for. I mean, who knows? I mean, I can't even imagine the behind-the-scenes stuff that people had to go through, and not just him, but his family, and all. And I got to say this. I think Andrew, his younger brother, is, big brothers are superheroes, and for all the times, it wasn't just Pete that refused to feel sorry for himself because of his force of personality. Everyone around him refused to let anyone know that they were feeling sorry for themselves. Right. It's naive to think they didn't have dark moments and horrible times and horrible days, but they refused to show that to the world.
Yeah.
And, that's a testament to their strength, and it's a testament to Pete's strength. It's just incredible.
To that point, we had an interview with his wife, Julie. Thank you. Yeah, and it was about 48 hours before she announced that she was pregnant years ago. And I'm not sure how old their daughter is now.
I think about 5.
But that would be,
roughly.
That
I
would
don't
make
know
sense,
exactly,
yeah. And she was, she said, "Do you mind if we do this interview a little bit earlier, just over the phone? Mind if we do it right now, because I actually have to get off to the doctors." And I had actually known, somebody had told me that they believe she's about to announce she's pregnant. So I just kind of said it to her. She goes, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" And she goes, "Yeah, I am." And heading off to the doctors right now. And I said, we just had like a real moment of just real quickly, off the record stuff where I said, "How you doing with everything?" And she said, kind of chuckled and just said, "We just keep trucking, And I was like, that another one of those things that just sticks with you. Like, what a powerful woman to have by your side too.
I'm not going to pretend that I know Julie. I've met her, I've shaken her hand a couple times, but she's an incredible to be able to be so strong for the world and for Pete.
Yeah.
Again, everyone's human, and so you can't imagine what goes on, but she's Pete's legacy will live on in a million ways. The most important way in the world will be his daughter, and whether it was climbing on his lap and watching a game with him or whatever. Those, I mean, if it's not the single most worldwide incredible story of the last decade, I don't know what is. Really I mean, truly, like, if you think about all the things and all the meaningful things that have happened in the world, I can't think of anything else. I'm trying to take my local yokel hat off and my blinders that way, but the way he moved the world, both like again directly to people that he knew, but tangentially to people that he never got to meet, is so mountainous and just so huge.
Do you, knowing him like you did, obviously as a young adult and was growing into a man and becoming a very successful young man, do you think he realized? Do you think he? I mean, I'm sure he did in his by the time it was over in these final years. He had to. I mean, it was everywhere. He was a legend. He's a monster,
Yeah.
And but do you think he even had a full impact, a full idea of the impact that he had made on the world? I mean, it's going to be tough.
Probably not. I mean, and I only say that not because of any naivete or anything. I think it's just when you're at the center of that, you kind of know, but this is going to be felt. Stories going to be told about him for years. I mean, not for the next 10 minutes. This is going to be for the next 10, 15, 20, and who knows how many people's lives have been made better that you can't even directly attribute to what he did, but just the movement. And it's. I don't think anybody could know what they've done for the world in that way, just because he was so grounded, and he was just such a I hate to say this because it sounds like he was a guy's guy, and he was kind and he was caring, but he was a young guy who had his own little mojo going, and and so I think he knew how he impacted his inner circle. I don't think there's any way to conceive for any of us to understand how widely impacted this has been felt.
Absolutely. Again, we're joined here by Greg Genualdo. He is the Hamilton Wenham Athletic Director and coached Pete Frates in 2 sports at St. John's Prep when Pete was in high school. The late Pete Frates, who we're dedicating this show to and remembering today. I'd mentioned Coach at all. Everybody I knew, it seemed. I mean, granted, I'm a Danvers guy, so I'm the town over from where Pete lives. I mean, again, I'm kind of like you. It's tough to kind of remove yourself because he's so big in our area, but it is true that he's big all across the world. And I think about these campaigns, and I can't think of another one really that in my lifetime, I'm 32, that has just taken off like that. Like one day it was on my Facebook feed. I remember. I think that's probably the first place I saw it. I know that he used Facebook very successfully, and others around him used Facebook very successfully, but I think that's how I saw it. Ended up on my Facebook's feed, if I remember correctly, ended up challenging a few people to do the ice bucket challenge and then donate some money. I think he nominated 3 people, and then 3 more people do it, and those 3 ends up nominating 3 more, yada, yada, yada. It goes on and on and on. And I just, in my lifetime, I mean, there's been some things that have been close, especially after that, because that was a trendsetter, but nothing like that. A campaign that just took off out of nowhere like that.
Yeah, I'm going to make myself sound like a donkey. I knew they had done some type of polar plunge for him early on. And when I started seeing, I'm not a social media guy, when I started seeing all the ice bucket stuff, I thought it was just a polar plunge. And I remember, I think it was in the summer, I remember thinking, what's the big deal about that? It's the middle of summer, so we're going swimming. Like, and then, eventually one of my friends was like, no, you dummy. Do it, like, you coach him, right? And so we started talking. And no, I mean, you don't want to compare it because every tragedy is horrendous. But, you think about worldwide things, and, like, I was very young in the 80s when people started talking about the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And then I was a sophomore in high school when Magic Johnson announced that he had HIV. And, like, that was that type of information wave and people getting behind something. Like, I was young, so I don't really remember it that well.
Yeah.
There's been things that have happened overseas, like with weather tragedies or whatever, and you see people, or the thing in New Orleans. Yeah. It must have been 10 years ago now or something. Stuff like that comes close, but those things don't seem to have endured the way that this has, and the way that this seems like it's going to. I don't think this is done, right? I think there's an awareness around ALS, and the Steve Gleason from the Saints in his own way in another part of the country has really taken on the challenge. And, I don't think Pete's going to be the last person we ever knew that had this. Yeah. And I think that's going to keep this going until it's a manageable thing. Like I don't know the science. I'm not going to pretend to be that smart, but it's you hope that it's something that you can manage eventually.
Gleason did in a lot of ways. Those when you do think of it as far as on that popularity or well-known names who have it. Gleason is the other one from the Saints, who I think they had a big 30 for 30 on ESPN, and he really opened up. He put the cameras right on him as soon as he learned about the diagnosis and said, I want people to see how this, and he's like Pete like that in a lot of ways, a bit of an open book. Like they weren't hiding from it. They wanted people to see it, and they wanted people to realize how bad it was, and not necessarily feel sorry, but we need to tackle this.
Well, and there's a million different ways to go about this, but being in the world of athletics, you learn and you try the best you can to pass on what you've learned about taking challenges on head on, shying away from nothing, saying, you want me, come and get me. I'm right here, and this is who I am, and I'm proud of it, and nothing's going to stop me from what I want to do. And I do think there's a similarity there with them both being athletes, even though Pete didn't get to the level that Steve did. That mentality's the same. How many football games did you just cover in high school on Thanksgiving? Every one of those, there's players in every one of those games that won't have the talent of an NFL player or a professional athlete, but there's something about that mindset that hopefully can carry you. And when you are faced with these types of things, God forbid, then you're equipped to understand how to compete. At least a little bit. I don't know.
I'm guessing you're like every high school coach. You have when they have a player go on and play high college level sports. In this case, Pete playing baseball at Boston College. I'm guessing you probably keep an eye on him from time to time and just try to see what kind of year is he having, that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. Especially I think when Pete went to BC, and there was a lot of kids like I mentioned. I think Matty Antonelli went to Wake Forest. And Jonathan Goff was at Vanderbilt, and John McCarthy went to BU for hockey, and there was other kids, and now it's not just TV. You can follow any kid at any level through like the internet and just kind of stream their games or whatever, and Twitter now, and it's kind of, that is a thing for coaches that we love all the kids we coach and the best coaches, and my football coach Jim Pugh comes to mind, where every kid on the roster is the most important kid, and you coach every kid on the roster. But it is fun now that you can follow kids. I remember sitting at my desk looking up BC box scores to see how Pete did. I vividly remember that.
And he had a great career too. How can you give us a feel how? Obviously everybody knows he's good because he's the captain of Boston College Division I baseball. How good was he though? So
in baseball, it'd be inappropriate for me to say I spent the.
You were the football guy.
Yeah. Well, so his senior year at St. John's, I helped out with the baseball team, and again that team had some serious studs. They had Larry Day, Ketchin, and Matty Antonelli was on that team, and they actually lost to Jeff Allison and Peabody in the North Finals, and what I still think is the greatest high school baseball game I've ever seen in my life. But he was a starter on a team that was insanely good, and he didn't hit leadoff, but he was up there in the order. He played outfield, and when I saw him in football, he went from that skinny little freshman kid to his senior year. When he was a junior, I was the varsity outside linebacker coach, and I kept saying in preseason, I said, he's the best one out here. They're like, no, he's not. Shut up. And I said, watch for 10 minutes. He doesn't do the wrong thing once. He sticks his nose in. He makes plays. He's around the ball. Okay, so then he did really good as an outside linebacker for me junior year. And then, of course, Coach O'Leary, who I love with all my heart, said, I'm taking him. He's going to play free safety. I was like, oh, thanks, Coach. I coached him for a year, taught him how to recognize offense, and now he's out of here.
You knew right away, though. Pete Frates was the guy. He was always in the right spot, always around the ball.
Around the ball, and always seemed to be making plays. And, again, at that level, he might not have been the single best athlete, but you're talking about comparing him to professional players, right? And he was always there. He was right there, and his ability to compete was unbelievable.
What about, you mentioned, and I'm sure you have other stories that are kind of like this, because when somebody goes into the huddle and keeps calling the wrong plays, but has their coaching staff laughing because look at him, he says it with gravitas. He's you can almost can't help you but
there
laugh.
Were a couple times we just let him run it just to see what happens.
Just to see what happens.
But that was a very short-lived thing. He wasn't going to be a varsity high school quarterback with future NFL players taking snaps, literally. But you could tell he was he was an athlete, man, and he was a competitor. He was an athlete. He's just a great teammate. He always seemed to be, like we talked about, right in the mix of every single play, big plays, small plays, always in the right spot. Always at practice. Wasn't one of those guys that was ever hurt and missing stuff.
Yeah.
Just an incredible kid to coach. Really impressive.
Until the day he passed away here this week, he was a big part of the Boston and the Boston suburbs, the sports community, obviously. And, this is a show where we're talking about a lot of his athletic prowess. But, I've heard so many stories about him going. I was just at the gym last night in Beverly playing basketball with my guys, and a lot of those guys had known him a little bit. And one of them is considerably younger than me, graduated from high school a few years back, and said, I remember he came in and actually spoke to us before one of our hockey games, one of our big hockey games, and we all knew who he was and we knew what he was battling, and the message was, don't let anything get in the way. Whatever life deals you, don't stop, just keep going. He goes, it just stuck with me. And he's like, talk about getting ready to go out on the ice and have like a message that you're ready to go out there just and do anything for. It was just, he said it was so inspiring.
I'm getting goosebumps on the back of my neck because you said something that sparked something in my brain I haven't thought of. When he was a junior playing football, we were good that year. We went 11-0 in the regular season. We lost to Everett in the playoffs, which I'm still not over. But we played Bill Ricker that year. And they were one of the first teams that was just throwing the ball all over the yard. This was the early 2000s. And some teams they had a West Coast offense and shotgun. And their coach had said something in the paper that week and said something like, he said, I'm trying to think of what the coach said. He said, it comes down to if my X's can beat your O's. And Pete cut that out of the paper.
Really?
Blew it up, put it on the bulletin board. And he spoke to like the defense kind of, and the coaches were going up, and I was going to say something to the outside linebackers, and he looked at me and said, Coach, I got it. And he went nuts.
He spoke. He didn't let you speak.
He said, Coach, I got it.
Really?
I said, all right. And again, it was a small group of kids. It wasn't the whole team. But it was like 7 or 8 guys that he was talking to. And he went nuts about how the other coach could actually think it comes down to schemes and not about heart and not about soul. Oh, wow. and all. And I think we were winning 24-0 at the end of the first quarter. There was pick sixes, and that's when you could do peel back blocks, and not allowed anymore. But I can't believe you just said that, because it sparked that in my head, and I hadn't thought about that for years. I remember being I think we were in the auditorium at Bill Ricker High School, and you could tell he felt it in his toes, and everybody was drooling at the mouth, ready to go play. Yeah. And again, he was 16 years old then. So the fundamental question when you ask, are you surprised by all this? Part of me, yes, just because it's so huge, and part of me isn't.
Yeah. It's a certain breed, isn't it? That, not everybody can go out in front of their teammates and, tell their coach, you know what, this one's on me.
And he was talking to seniors. He wasn't just talking to like little kids or kids his age. And again, it was a group of maybe like 10 kids. I'm not trying to pretend it was something that it wasn't. I don't like doing that. But he looked at me as I was about to talk, and he said, I got it. And I said, okay, go ahead. And I just listened, and I wanted to go play.
Yeah, what a leader. Again, we're joined here by Craig Genualdo. He's the Hamilton Wenham Athletic Director. Coached Pete Frates, who we're remembering and dedicating this show to today. Coached him at St. John's Prep football for 4 years, and baseball in Pete's senior year. I know it must be a little surreal knowing him and seeing him on the television, in the newspapers, whatever. It's not just Red Sox players and Patriots players. It's politicians. It's presidents.
Yeah, it is a little strange.
It's rock stars. It's everything. Right. It must have been like, this is the little Pete. I think. What'd you say with the what elbows? The
elbows you could put in the pencil sharpener.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy watching this kid change the world.
There's that line in the poem, if you can walk with kings nor lose the common touch, and that's who he was. He wasn't going to be awed by anybody. Yeah. And he was going to say who he was, and he was going to be himself, and he was going to do his thing. And just on you watch the TV and you're like, oh my God, Pete's with David Ortiz, Pete's with, senators and this and that. And then you remember why. And you just think it stinks because there's not just him, but there's so many people that have such a good story to tell that you wish that everyone could get their story out there. Yeah. But for some reason, like that Malcolm Gladwell book where how does a phenomenon catch a spark? Caught a spark in this case because of Pete. Yeah. Right? Like it caught a spark because of his force of person. I mean, and his parents. I mean, like Nancy is a force of nature.
Yeah.
And we did a ice bucket challenge at our school at the beginning of last school year, and she was out there, and she's cheering kids on, and so she's her own force of nature. And Andrew, like I said, to me, he's the biggest rock star in the world because he just loves his big brother. He's been a rock for all this. He just wants to be there with his brother, and he's not looking for anything other than to do that. So it is weird to see that, and then you realize why they're there, and it's, it's sad.
I know Andrew's putting on the, and again, I don't know him, but just I can tell just from watching from the outside looking in that Andrew's putting on that tough face, and we're going to carry on Pete's legacy and all that. But I mean, he did just lose his older brother, and there's nothing tougher in the world than that, especially when they were as close as they were. I know one of the guys I played basketball with last night is a Beverly police officer, and he was friends with Andrew. And I asked him if he wanted to say a couple things on tape, and he kind of got choked up and said, I can't.
Yeah.
And we kind of, at that point, you just let him go on his way. Right. But it was clear to me that being friends with Andrew meant you were also friends with Pete.
Exactly.
That was, and it was very clear to me that they were close enough in that way. And I could honestly you can almost just with that make the connection about how close the brothers were.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that, and that's their parents. They welcomed everybody with open arms. They I was surprised when I was the young coach that they actually knew my name, and did thank you and did thank everybody, and were just so gracious. And like I said in the beginning, Pete was raised by incredible people long before this awful nonsense ever happened, and he was who he was because of who raised him. And their family's amazing, and they're I can't imagine what it's been like. My only hope for them, I doubt they're listening, but my only hope for them is that they have peace and that they can get through these days, weeks, and months, and then at some point, when it all comes, I don't want to say reality. They've been dealing with reality for a long time, but when something happens on the road, they realize what an incredible son they have. What incredible sons they have.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in this world you could want more for your children than to be best friends. And
you have to think about Nancy Frady's too. Actually, first thing she did this morning, I know I was at work when the news came across. She said the polar plunge they do in Gloucester for Pete, which I think you mentioned earlier, still going to happen at the end of the month. She goes, "Hey, we're still a go, by the way." Just talk about the keep trucking attitude.
Yeah, huh? I mean, I don't. And she's been right there with them and right there through all of this, and I can't imagine she's gonna stop anytime, and hopefully, she has some time for herself and for her family, and and they have time for each other because they need that. But no greater legacy than to keep going.
Absolutely. I think about you actually, Coach. You had a bunch of, I'm trying to remember, put myself back into when we were doing the Ice Bucket Challenge, and I guess I was probably just out of college, but I'm trying to think about how much I actually knew about ALS. I knew it was bad. I knew it was one of the worst ones you can get, but I'm not exactly sure. I definitely have a better understanding of it now,
right?
With the Pete, just because of Pete and the Steve Gleasons of the world. But I mean, I think a lot of people thought it was, it was the Lou Gehrig's disease. I remember that speech, that gets played on the loop from Yankee Stadium and all that. But I don't remember asking too many questions about it growing up. And then, becoming a young adult, Pete brings us to the forefront. And then I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to just how bad the disease was. And I mean it in a good way, because it drew attention to an issue that needed more attention, I think.
Yeah, and it's, who knows, again, I wish I was smarter. I wish I was more of a doctor and could give, could be sitting here telling you about the advances in the disease, but I know they've happened because I've heard smart people say it.
I have too, yeah.
And so that's what I kind of rely on, right? Right. When you don't know something, rely on the smartest person in the room.
Yep.
And so I know, based on all the stuff that his family's done and the awareness, and it's like you said, it's not just the money, it is the awareness, it's knowledge, it's what are we doing about this now, and with all the stuff they're continuing to do, hopefully this is a runaway train. Again, who knows if you'll ever be able to prevent this. I don't think it's anything that's preventable, but like other things, maybe it becomes more manageable. Maybe people can deal with it better as life goes on. I know that anytime someone's having an information session or there's something, I try to read about it.
Yeah.
Because, I did have one of my parents' friends who was a lot older. It was the first time I ever heard about this. He was probably in his 50s, and he had it. I remember thinking, like, wow, geez, that stinks. And that was, 30 years ago. And, then when it happened to a young person, and then, you see this guy from the Saints, and he's a young person, you sit up going, that could be me, that could be my friends, that could be. And so it has to hit home sometimes to really make a dent in the world. And I think what Pete did, and again, this speaks to who he is again. I keep saying the same thing. I think what he did was he made it personal for everyone, even if they didn't know him.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's because people could identify with this story.
Yeah.
He was just a local kid. He wasn't a prodigy, right?
Yeah.
He was just a kid that had above average talent, but competed like nobody's business. And he made it personal for everybody. So now it's not just the people that knew someone that sit up and pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Now everybody does.
Right.
And I think that's meaningful. I think there's something there.
I think of that day, that summer there. You guys had that great run with Amesbury Little League there, and you had all your Little League kids in here.
Yeah.
I can imagine after you've coached a kid like Pete Frates that maybe some of his messages creep into maybe your pregame speeches, or it might be a little bit tougher with 11 and 12-year-olds. But did you ever draw on some of that for?
Every day.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. You think about it. You take any coach will tell you. You take a piece of every player you've ever coached, and you hold that sacred, and you take them with you.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you're not in the right business, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I absolutely, again, hard to talk to 12-year-old kids that, are worrying about what Fortnite game they're going to play and picking their nose half the time.
Yeah.
Hard to sink in directly, but the ability to compete, to never back down, to never be awed by what's on the other side, and to always know that you belong.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I take from Pete. Just always feeling like, I don't care who you are. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how big you are. I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to kick your butt.
Right.
I'll keep it like that. I'll keep it PG. But that's the stuff that I take with me. And, as my sons get older and as they start to understand a little more of the world and stuff, it's absolutely certain that Pete's story will get passed on from me to my kids. And I think that if we all do that locally, then I think that's what creates the change in the world.
Again, Greg Genualdo joining us. He's the Hamilton Wenham athletic director and coached Pete Frates at St. John's Prep. Football 4 years, baseball 1 year. Craig, you said something that I have heard. It's a cliche, but if it ever was meant for somebody, it is Pete Frates. You used that term earlier about being a guy's guy. Which is just a way of saying everybody liked him, right?
Right. That's what it is.
It was. And I keep hearing that. You see all these. It wasn't just like and definitely the professional sports teams rallied around him, but I saw the guys from like Barstool Sports, that blog, and they were all over his house doing a documentary, and I guess they had a close relationship, and just so many other different organizations that ended up really being a part of his life over these last however many years. And I know I heard Tom Brady today. He said, he had a really nice quote for Pete. I won't try to remember it and misquote him, but Patrice Bergeron, I think, said something along the lines of, we don't do it because we have to be there. We do it because we genuinely enjoy being around him. Right. And that was kind of the feeling that he gave off. I'm sure he used to do it in the locker rooms too, but definitely during this battle, he just brought people in and brought people together.
To me, there's no greater compliment as an athlete than to be called a great teammate. Yeah. And Pete took that from a very small scale and made it worldwide. Yeah. And like I said, I think that speaks to why everybody feels personally connected to him, whether it's, his inner circle or someone like me that knew him for a time and he meant a lot to me and has since grown in what he means to me since then, and people that never met him. He is a great teammate, and there isn't anybody in his locker room or in his life, or whatever analogy you want to use there, that wouldn't say, wow, what a great person. Yeah. And again, this was a long time before any of this tragedy happened and any of this stuff happened. This was just who he was. Yeah. And you're right. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody that knew him, or that at any point in his life that had a negative thing to say about him.
Yeah, and does it surprise you? I mean, I'm sure that there were hard moments. Anybody who, I think we probably see a lot of those moments when people are in the house and there's visitors and, look at Pete, he's fighting. But there are most definitely dark times, and there are struggles when you're battling a disease like this. But really, I keep hearing from family members and people that were close to him, they keep saying he really just didn't complain.
I never heard of a complaint. I never heard him complain. Never saw him complain.
No, why me?
No, why me?
No.
And I never saw anyone in his inner circle say that either. And I think that part is what's so mind-blowing to me, is that not only did Pete say it, but it was so genuine and such to the core of who he was, that nobody around him would allow themselves to complain. And I think, you could picture a scenario in which someone that loved him, was on TV at one point and, was just crabby. I mean, anybody human would do that.
Yeah.
I never saw a family member. I never saw a close friend. I never saw anyone do that. And to me, that's obviously shows how strong they are. But Pete may have been the central force behind that, there was something, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
So why would anyone else?
Yeah.
And, that's what I take from that anyway.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I've heard that, so many times. And I mean, geez, think about when you're, I know I do this a lot. In all honesty, I've thought about him when, if I'm frustrated with whatever, work or having a bad day, it's really, I'm going to complain.
Yeah.
Really?
And look, we all, 99% of the world works really hard at their job. And I believe that, and believes that they want to do a good job. And, we all want to do a good job. And there's days when we feel like we're being taken down and being blocked from doing the good in our job that we want to do. And it's frustrating, not because, out of any, not because of any like ego thing, but just because we want to serve others, right? Like, you're serving the community by all the things you do in this studio. You get kids out there, you get good stories out there, and it makes the world better, everything you do, right? And as athletic directors and as coaches, we're trying to do the best for our teams and our coaches and our school community. That's always our motivation. And when we can't, anybody from time to time gets frustrated with that. Not because, it's not going our way, but just because we're trying to do things for others. And I think, for him to be able to constantly just, I mean, obviously I'm sure he had a million setbacks from day to day, and an event that he was excited to go to maybe, and then he couldn't, but he just kept trucking, like you said.
Absolutely. I wonder, you're in the high schools now. You're the athletic director at Hamilton. How many years?
This is my 8th year there.
Oh, good run here so far. Yeah. What does I'm a little bit removed now. It's funny. I think part of the reason why the Frady story, I was just younger than him, and whereas a lot of the same, we read a lot of the same stuff. I could tell we're both into sports and all that. We had a lot of things in common. So I'm very close to it in that way, and it exploded when I was at the right age, and social media was blowing up. And I wonder what the high school kid now, when you say Pete Frady, is it to the the sophomore, the junior in high school? Do they have to go, now who's that again? I know the name, or is it what is the deal?
Not in our school.
Not in
I know we've done, and this is just a small little thing, but our baseball team plays St. John's every year in the Pete Frady's awareness game.
Yep.
And they kill us, and but like, we've played them close, but that's a day you don't care about the score. You just you just want to compete and honor his legacy. And so I know our school knows him. I know the kids at the prep have, pretty much every sport has a Pete Frady's game. They have the special jerseys, and our baseball team has some gorgeous jerseys. And I do question if it's 10 years from now, hopefully everyone still knows him. In our school. But I know that his legacy, whether it's directly linked to him, or again that tangential thing where it's just his spirit and his drive and what he's done, is going to live on for. I mean, the dorm at Endicott is named after him, I think, right?
Yeah.
He's got fields and parks named after him.
Leaving flowers and everything there last night at Endicott.
Really?
My sister works
there.
Oh,
that's
so
awesome.
she sent me a
that's so
picture.
good to hear. I mean, I think there's parks in Beverly named after him. I think, and eventually what we take is, just, if you think about stuff from 30, 40 years ago, and you try to think of, okay, what part is living now, and then translate that out. I think the biggest thing will be the fact that he furthered research, that he furthered awareness, and that there's an entire generation of humans, whether they can put their finger on it or not, that at one point someone will say, "Oh, you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge?"
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And that'll spark conversation. That'll spark things. And, the greatest legacy that he could live, that he could leave in the whole world, is if it's 100 years from now, and we're not talking about ALS, and no one's talking about ALS like a big deal.
Yeah, well
right?
said.
It's just a nuisance at that point.
Yep.
And, talk about a legacy, and that might be a silent legacy, certainly, but, I know he lives in my heart, and those closest to me, he's in their hearts, and people that were important to me when I coached at St. John's, or kids at the school now, I know it's in their hearts.
Yeah.
So, that's all we can do is just have it live on that way.
Well, let's hope in 10 years, if the high school kid does need a refresher on who was Pete Frates again, I'm sure you'll be happy to give him a whole
I'll be
lowdown.
there, man. I'll be front and center, ready to tell the story.
We'll finish again with this. Again, we've had a great talk here with Craig Genualdo. He's the Hamilton Wenham athletic director and coached the late Pete Frates at St. John's Prep, 4 years of football and 1 year of baseball, which, of course, Pete went on to play Division I baseball at Boston College and captained that Eagles team. Quite an achievement for a guy that Craig here tells me was never the most talented guy on the field. He's just always the hardest worker and the most heart, which is a fun little coach's perspective there. Coaches,
a lot of talent, so I don't want to pretend like he was also very, very good, but you're right. Yeah.
That's really the coaches always love that guy though, right? Who can maximize the talent. There's no other really great kid to coach than that kid, right?
I'm pretty sure when he graduated, I feel bad I don't have this knowledge off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure when he graduated, he got the Senior Athlete of the Year award. Yeah. For kind of all the sports kind of combined. And again, when you think about that, there was at least 3 professional players, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 Division I. We had a linebacker on the team go to Notre Dame, Nicky Borsetti. We had some incredible kids, and he was named the Athlete of the Year at St. John's that year. And that's, that is, if you don't have any talent, you don't get that award. So he was incredibly talented, but you couldn't find a coach that didn't want him on their starting lineup and in their huddle all the time.
Was he just one of those kids that would, you have certain people, I remember players that maybe there was low energy one day or something, but when that kid showed up and came out of the locker room, it was like the place was lifted. And it wasn't always, I know I mentioned the story in Bill Ricker about the pregame thing. It wasn't usually like that. It was usually just his presence. Yeah. And you'd see him in practice, when they were running against the scout team, and he'd be going full dip, and he'd be going full speed, and he'd be, especially the year he played safety, he's back there barking out signals. And, if you're a young sophomore linebacker and a senior captain's behind you yelling at you to do something, you're going to do it. Right. And always picking people up off the pile and always encouraging his teammates and always being there. And it was his presence. And yes, you could, when Pete wasn't there, you noticed, and when Pete was there, you noticed. Coaches don't have favorites, but were there ever some moments where you guys looked at each other as a coaching staff and said, "Love that kid"?
I don't want to speak for anyone else. I know from my standpoint, and again, I hope this is a 1,000,000%. I would have said this the day after he graduated. From the bottom of my heart, I would have said this. He was one of my favorites because when we started, not a lot of people that were on that sophomore team actually wound up making a huge impact on varsity. And he was the model that I used in the years after to say, he started here. He wound up starting 2 years on 2 back-to-back conference and played in front of 10,000 people on Thanksgiving and made plays. And he was one of my favorites, and I'm not embarrassed to say that at all. And he was, he was one of my favorites for a reason, and it's because of who he was.
Well, Craig Genualdo, I know it's a tough day for you. I'm sure. I don't know where you were when you heard the news yesterday. I think a lot of us knew.
I was in school.
A lot of us knew it was coming.
I saw Lou Maloney's tweet before I saw anything else. I went, no. And then
you're never really ready for that. I mean, you know it's coming, but it's still shocking.
Oh, you're right. I mean, you're almost when you hear the news 8 years ago, it seems like that's the end there. And then all this stuff happened in the middle that's so incredible. Yeah. And then you kind of, if you stop to think about it, in the back of your head it's coming at some point. Yeah. Or at least you think you do. And then, and then to hear it, it was just, ugh. But I know he's got incredible family that have incredible strength, and I know, it's going to be a whirlwind few days here. But I know they have each other, and I know they have his legacy at the center of all that, and I know in my heart that'll carry him through.
Final thought here, Coach.
Yeah.
I wonder what's the from somebody who got to have that very unique coaching a player like Pete Frates. What's the one thing that you would like the world to know from a coach's perspective, a friend's perspective, however you want to phrase it? What's the one thing you want people to know about Pete Frates?
Just that he was the most genuine, authentic person that anyone could be, and in some ways, he wasn't any different than anyone, and in every way, he was different than everyone.
Yeah.
And that's, when you stop to think about what you can do in this world, and you stop to think about what that gravitas and force of nature and never say die attitude and always compete and compete and compete, to know what he did with that spirit inside him. If you have that and you have a loving, supporting cast, which he had around him, you can accomplish almost anything in this world.
Well, I know it's always tough. I know coaches always get it's tough no matter what the case, especially when it's so public like Pete Frates' case was. But it's always tough when a player goes before a coach when you've coached him at the lower level, and obviously gone way too soon, Pete Frates. But what a legacy he left. And Coach Craig Genualdo, thank you so much for taking some time.
Thanks for having me.
Telling some stories.
I sort of, when I think you reached out to, I said, why did they, like, what am I doing? You don't need me there. And they said, no, you know him a little bit. And I kind of feel silly being here because there's a million people that knew him better that could be in this seat. I'm not trying to pretend that that's not the case.
No.
I just, someone asked, so I wanted to share what I could.
We appreciate it. It's a really good story, some great insight, and just some things that we didn't know, and we always appreciate that. And unbelievable. I said it last night when I was out in Beverly. It's not just Beverly. It's everywhere around this area right now. You can feel there is a loss. You can feel it. It's a sense of loss. People are talking about it everywhere. Coffee shops, the gym, work. But what an unbelievable legacy that Pete Frates left behind. And Coach Greg Genualdo, you got a chance to coach him, and a lot of years with Pete. 4 years of football, 1 year of baseball.
Yeah.
You had a good run. And
I'm lucky. I count myself very lucky for that.
All right. Well, Coach Craig Genualdo,
Thanks,
we
man.
appreciate the time. Hamilton Wenham Athletic Director now. Good luck with the rest of the season here. I know you're busy. Thank you so much for taking a full
course.
hour. I know it's a busy job over there.
I'm
And
honored to do it.
all right. Again, as we honor Pete Frates here on a Tuesday afternoon in Newburyport, let's do this. I'll get out of the way real quickly. I'll come back to wrap it up. My name's Drew Moholland. It's Afternoon Drive on Joppa Radio. All right. Welcome back to Afternoon Drive. My name is Drew Moholland. Again, a big thanks to Greg Genualdo, the Hamilton Wenham Athletic Director, taking some time out of, for those of you who know, we have enough athletic directors on here. It is a busy job, especially in season like they're in right now. Never mind before the holidays with everything going on. But Craig Genualdo, big thanks. He coached Pete Frates at St. John's Prep 4 years with the football squad and 1 year with baseball. And really some great stories. We really appreciate him joining the show today. Tough time for him, tough time for everybody that knew Pete Frates, and really tough time for the community because he was ended up being a staple of the community and everything he was fighting for. Pete Frates, a huge loss. What a battle with ALS, 8 years, and passing away at age 34. Obviously too young, but what an impact in his too short of life. We remember Pete Frates and dedicate this show to him today. And again, thank you to Greg for coming on here. That was fantastic to get some stories that about the person and about the person before ALS and the person during ALS. And it's quite a remarkable story, the Pete Frates story, and one we won't soon forget. Big thanks to Lily Doucette producing the show on the radio side today. Tyler Neufield's in there helping us as always on the TV side. Hello to everybody watching on TV and streaming at home. We appreciate it. We'll be back here Thursday, same time, same place, 3 o'clock. Joppa Afternoon Drive, whole nother edition. Approaching the holidays, get that shopping done, everybody. And but we will see you back here Thursday to close out the week strong. Don't know the guest yet. We won't give that away. Think I know who we're going to have, but not sure yet. So we will not say that yet. But tune in. You'll be surprised. Thursday, 3 p.m., same time, same place. Again, we wish all the best to the family of Pete Frates. We dedicate this show to him today. What a life, gone too soon. But Pete Frates, what a legacy he leaves behind. We will see you on Thursday, folks. My name's Drew Moholland. This has been Joppa Afternoon Drive. Bye-bye now.